KPBS On Demand is supported by UC San Diego's Art Power, presenting cellist Joshua Roman, performing from his album Immunity, alongside music by J.S. Bach and more, Sunday, June 22nd at UC San Diego's Epstein Family Amphitheater. Reserve your tickets at artpower.ucsd.edu.
This week on Roundtable, classrooms fill up across San Diego. We'll check in on the return of in-person classes at our local schools. It's also a return to the gridiron. High school football and other sports return after a lost season. And what's a San Diego special? The seemingly solvable problems that have gone unfixed for decades. I'm Maureen Cavanaugh, and the KPBS Roundtable starts now.
KPBS On Demand is supported by UC San Diego's Art Power, presenting cellist Joshua Roman, performing from his album Immunity, alongside music by J.S. Bach and more, Sunday, June 22nd at UC San Diego's Epstein Family Amphitheater. Reserve your tickets at artpower.ucsd.edu.
Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Maureen Cavanaugh. Joining me on this remote edition of the KPBS Roundtable are KPBS education reporter M.G. Perez, KUSI sports anchor Brandon Stone, and Voice of San Diego editor-in-chief Scott Lewis. For the first time in a long time, things are starting to get back to something like normal for families with kids in school and the thousands of college students pursuing a degree in San Diego. School districts and universities are welcoming people back to campus for in-person classes. But there are still reminders of the COVID-19 pandemic and the risk that the progress we've made might be lost. It's a busy time for those who cover our schools, and that's why we're joined by M.G. Perez, the new education reporter here at KPBS. Welcome to the Roundtable, M.G.
Maureen, it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Now, we'll dive into what you've seen so far at local schools, but let's look ahead first. San Diego Unified, our largest school district, begins its school year on Monday. The routine will be like old times, in person and on campus. Generally, what have you heard about how they're feeling about this big milestone in relation to the pandemic?
Well, let me start by saying there's a caveat to going back to normal. I don't think that we will ever find our way back there. It's going to be a new normal, and that is as a result of what we have all survived over the last 18 months. So masks, of course, will be worn. There is social distancing for San Diego Unified. They have made a concerted effort to make it clear to students, to parents, to the community that safety is first and foremost, to the learning that they hope students are ready to go back to in a more traditional setting.
Of course, vaccines have been available for those 12 and older for a while, but we are still waiting on shots for those who are younger. So are elementary and middle schools doing anything differently than, say, high schools in terms of COVID protections?
Masking up. It is all about the masks. And I will tell you, people have been concerned that, students, can't hold on to their mask or they'll have trouble keeping it on and so forth. But it's actually the opposite. Children are resilient. And the mask issue for children at that young age is actually a status symbol. What cool mask are you wearing? And so that's really the big piece, is that they will need to remain masked throughout the day and social distanced to an extent. But that's really what's happening there, because they are the ones who are most unvaccinated.
Now, besides San Diego Unified, other local school districts are already back to school. Are any local districts approaching this in a way that's unique or otherwise got your attention?
Well, I don't know about unique. It has become, as we all know, a very political issue. And as a result of that, districts are they're reacting to what their immediate communities want or don't want. And so as a result of that, unlike San Diego Unified, like in Grossmont High School District, for instance, there is no requirement to wear a mask. It is encouraged indoors, and outside, no mask necessary. There is no social distance. They started 2 weeks ago. And I just had a conversation with a teacher who in 2 weeks' time has had 7 students go down with COVID.
Wow. Well, okay, community colleges and universities are also back on campus. SDSU began its fall semester this week. You covered that for KPBS. What was your impression on day one?
What really encouraged me was how excited students were to be back on campus. In interviewing several of them, I had forgotten, somebody who was an incoming freshman in 2020 has never been on the campus. And it's really refreshing to see these students eager to be back on campus and learning. And for the most part, I would say all of them are willing to do whatever it takes to keep them on campus, which means masking up and social distancing and being responsible citizens, really, to try to prevent COVID from another outbreak on the campus.
MG, let's talk a bit about your new role here at KPBS. What do you hope to explore as the education reporter?
Well, I come to this job at a time like no other in education. And so that's really the exciting part of it. This, as I said earlier, there is no going back to normal. I believe that in my heart. What it will be is the new normal, and what will be included in that are lessons learned, hopefully, experience shared during the shutdown, what worked, what didn't work. And it's my experience that young people are resilient, not only kindergartners, but young people in general, and they adapt much quicker to change. And so I think in this case, it may be the adults who are the problem in many cases. But that's where I'm headed. What is education in this world going to look like? And the other question everybody wants to know is, when will this end? When is the pandemic going to end? And I don't know that anyone has any idea what that's going to look like. But I do know that between now and then, whenever then comes, there will be people fighting, people trying their best to beat this thing. And in education, it affects the future. These students that we talk about, the population that we talk about, they are our future. And they may be the ones that provide us with the answers.
And you also bring a unique perspective to this position, having worked as a teacher. What does that experience lend to your reporting?
Well, I will tell you, Maureen, I never thought I would be back in broadcast news. I did it for 20 years, about 100 years ago. When I have been a teacher for 7 years with San Diego Unified. I have a master's degree in special education, so that is the population that I worked with primarily, and I loved that work. Because the victories may be small, but they are so much more significant. And one thing that I'm doing now is as we get ready for the school year to begin, I'm going to be doing an investigative piece into special education, population that was, left aside in some regards early in the pandemic. And so I've been there. I was there teaching at CPMA up in Claremont when the shutdown happened, and I was working with mod severe students. So imagine, if you will, a classroom of 9 students with various disabilities, many of them nonverbal, and then being told, you're going online, Zoom. And that was an adventure, and we made it. We made it to the end of that school year. And so I'm grateful for that. But I have been in the trenches, and I know what it's like to be in a classroom teaching both on Zoom and in person. And so that's a perspective that I want to bring out because these teachers really are unsung heroes in many ways. And many of them have decided to retire early. I wasn't really sure if I was going to come back. I wasn't sure where I was headed because along the way, I was also a COVID case investigator with the county. When school was not school last year, I decided I needed to do something to help the cause, and I did COVID investigation for 10 months. So this is all the skill set. These are the skill sets that I bring to this job, and I'm excited to see, what I can do with them.
Well, we are so pleased to have you join us. I've been speaking with MG Perez, education reporter for KPBS News. Thank you, MG.
Thank you, Maureen.
COVID didn't just sidetrack learning in the classroom, it also brought a huge disruption to youth sports. In the case of high school football, last year's fall season was canceled entirely and replaced with an abbreviated spring season. Beyond the play on the field, the games are a community builder for nonprofits and a springboard to college for many young athletes. Covering it all under the Friday Night Lights is KUSI's Brandon Stone. He's the host of the Prep Pigskin Report. And welcome to the Roundtable, Brandon.
Greetings. It's good to be here.
Now, the latest season of the PPR, as it's known to its viewers, kicked off last week. Does it feel like things were back to normal out there, at least on the football field?
It's interesting to think of the idea of normality because when you consider all that we've been through, it's almost hard to remember the pre-COVID era as compared to the not truly post-COVID, but what we're calling the post-COVID era. When I went to my game, there was not an abundance of masks, nor was there an abundance of distancing. But there definitely was this ominous thought of, will what we are doing now actually make it all the way to the end of November and the beginning of December? And that's truly the feel that you get is, this seems normal, but will it stay this way? And what we've already seen from some of the moves made by the Sweetwater District and made by San Diego Unified, we're trending back towards more our spring feel, and now wondering if we're heading back towards nothing at all.
Well, tell us what's happening there and anything else unique in how teams are dealing with COVID.
The biggest thing teams are doing now is this argument about when do we test, how much do we test, and what do we do after we finish testing. Another portion of that is, how does our athletic program, how does that compare with what our school is going through? If a person is connected to somebody with COVID through their English class, how should we deal with that in comparison to the fellow wide receiver or the fellow lineman next to me? The protocols are different by each school district. The amount of testing is different by each school district. And then when you add in private schools or parochial schools or charter schools who can have their own set of policies that are different from normal public school districts, it creates a system of inequality, whether that is on purpose or accidental.
Now, teams played a shortened season a few months back. How was that received by the players and coaches?
Very well. The largest emotion was one of gratitude and thankfulness, the opportunity to have the chance to play. Obviously, so many people saw the powerful movement, the Let Us Play movement, and how many people that grabbed the attention, it grabbed the headlines, it grabbed, and how so many people in power and politicians reacted on all sides of the spectrum and in all kinds of different ways. But the biggest emotion that I felt when we walked back on that field in March was, we didn't know if we'd get here, but we are here. And whether we think it's right or wrong that we are here, we're going to work in thankfulness and work to make sure that we stay out here, no matter if we should be out here or not. That's an emotion that carries all the way over from being out here is completely unsafe and we're out of our minds, all the way to, you should have never shut this down in the first place.
Now, many players dream about landing a college scholarship, but that involves a complex recruiting process. How was that disrupted last year?
I'm glad you asked that question. I had an opportunity during the lockdown time to interview 3 players, one from Patrick Henry and 2 from Madison High. And they were in the middle of trying to make an appeal to the governor and to other members of the state assembly and local arenas about getting the chance to play again. And one of those players was named Sebastian Quigg. And the largest thing that he talked about was that he had been working hard on the recruiting trail as a defensive lineman, trying to find a way, and he was getting attention from certain D1 schools. But the film that they cared the most about was your junior year film. And so he had junior year film, but didn't have all the film that he needed to have. He didn't have everything that he wanted. And because that film fell apart because he could not gain it, a lot of those Division I schools that he had been talking to had dropped their interest, meaning that he had to start focusing on schools at the FCS level or in Division III. It wasn't so much a slam towards those schools, but it was the highest amount of education that I want, I can't receive because I don't have the film to set up what I need to have. Now, he was able to get some film from the spring season, not just from when he played at Patrick Henry, but also from a private football league that he chose to play in. And that was able to help him launch and get him to UNLV, where he's at right now. But so many of our kids went through this And the domino that fell down from that was a lot of kids that would have been at D1 schools is that they ended up going either to FCS level schools or Division 3 schools, or ended up going to junior college. The irony in this, of course, is that a lot of programs who should not be as good as they will be in 2 years will be better because of it, including right here at San Diego State, in which we received some quality players who may have gone elsewhere otherwise.
Wow, what a story. Those, though, who are not in line for scholarships still get a lot from the experience of sports in high school, whether it's football or other sports. What can you say about how youth sports helps these students grow and how that was shaken by COVID?
The biggest thing is the slant to confidence. That's the largest issue that's developed. When you had the lockdown season, you had a lot of players. The only reason that they went to school, obviously, this is not global for everyone. This is a small slice of the athletic population. They go to school because it gives them the opportunity to play sports. And that opportunity then opens up other doors for them, and the circle of life continues. And not having that circle was disastrous for a lot of players. And then they couldn't look towards the student leaders that they normally look to, because they aren't there on a field right in front of them. They're back in their own home. And then there are times where they get in trouble for hanging out with each other, for being in these big bundles. But also, every school approached that differently. So those are some of the things that I would say were shaken by the COVID era.
The Prep Pigskin Report has grown into quite an operation over the years. Just how much ground are you covering every week?
The way that our show has grown is such a different answer than it would be 5 years ago. What we're doing now so much more is the social media aspect. What can we achieve when someone with a phone stands in the back of an end zone and films a touchdown? It can have just as much reach as what we put on broadcast TV. So a lot of our focus now, when we say we're covering 24, 25 games, is we're really saying we're sending 20 with traditional means and 4 or 5 with non-traditional means. And we're finding ways to impact kids from the second they step on a field, to the second they step off of it, to the second they go home, to the second they open their phone as soon as they're finished with a game, to the next week when they want to see what they've done. And that's our job, is to follow them along that pathway until they're finished with their high school career, and then give them something to look back on when they go and type in something on YouTube or look at something on Twitter a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later. Truly, it's a part of their life cycle, our show.
Brandon, before we go, please remind us when people can watch the show.
The best thing about reminding you when people can watch the show is there's so many different avenues in which they can do that. The traditional avenue, of course, is on Good Evening San Diego. We start with our pre-show that goes from 4 o'clock all the way to 7 o'clock. We have the first and 15, in which we break down the game of the week and some other important issues at 10:45. And then the big show, it comes on at 11 o'clock every Friday through the football season. And of course, on social media and online, the show never stops, where you can look at clips on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. There's probably like 5 other ways you can look at it. I just don't have them written down. My 36-year-old self is starting to fall back behind, but I'm catching up the best I can.
I've been speaking with Brandon Stone, sports anchor and reporter for KUSI. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Absolutely.
KPBS On Demand is supported by UC San Diego's Art Power, presenting cellist Joshua Roman, performing from his album Immunity, alongside music by J.S. Bach and more. Sunday, June 22nd at UC San Diego's Epstein Family Amphitheater. Reserve your tickets at artpower.ucsd.edu.
San Diego is among the 10 largest cities in the nation, but you'd never know it from some of the issues that linger here for years. For instance, the ability to expand convention space, the effort to create a robust transit system serving the airport, or simply having a coherent policy on vacation rentals. These are all seemingly solvable issues that just don't get done here. Mayor Todd Gloria once described a stymied issue like this as a San Diego special. That's the theme for a series of reports this week by Voice of San Diego. We're joined by Editor-in-Chief Scott Lewis. Hello, Scott.
Hi, Maureen. Thanks for having me.
Now, Scott, you've been leading Voice of San Diego for 15 years, and most of these issues were around back then. Do you have any insights why so many issues get stuck with no resolution for so long in this city?
No, I think I think there's a combination, right? Like San Diego is a place that people like to be the way it is. And I think that the forces that want to make it better or change things often have to go through a lot of challenges. And they also often sometimes have a distance or a contempt for the people who like things the way they are that causes a lot of tension. I think there's also some, rules here, some physics of our politics, of our public affairs that just make it hard. For instance, we struggled for a long time with the stadium question. A lot of other places were able to get a stadium built. Part of the reason why is because California requires a 2/3 vote for new taxes. That's not required in Texas. It's not required in Colorado or Indiana, these places that have built stadiums. And so there are some, realities that make things hard to do. And then there's kind of a culture here as well that struggles to decide, is it a big city wanting to build big things and do different and solve different issues, or is it a place that people want to be and relax and not have to worry about those big city issues?
Now, your staff tackled several of these San Diego specials with in-depth explanations on how we got here. How did you decide which topics to focus on?
We tried to stay away from some of the big crises in San Diego. We're always reporting on homelessness, for example, or the Tijuana border sewage issue, and these kinds of crises, affordable housing that we always wrestle with, or equity in education. We didn't want to; those aren't San Diego specials, right? Those are endemic, constant, chronic problems that San Diego and many other places have to deal with. And we shouldn't expect necessarily that San Diego can solve those kinds of things. So we tried to pick things that we should be able to resolve. Like we should, after 20 years or whatever of wrestling with some of these issues, we should be able to figure out a solution, resolve them, and move on to the next challenge. And so that's why we kind of selected the ones that we did. Why? I can't tell you how many times people have asked me, why doesn't the trolley connect to the airport? Why don't we, a lot of major cities have rail that goes to their airport. Ours goes right past the airport, and yet it still doesn't connect. And those kinds of questions, I think we just kind of wanted to engage with. Why haven't we expanded the convention center, even though they've been talking about it for almost 20 years now?
Another topic your team reports on is how Barrio Logan and Logan Heights, largely communities of color, were essentially split in two by San Diego's growth and military expansion decades ago. Why did you feel this deserved more attention and explanation?
This is one of those, I think it borders on one of these civic crises and tragedies that we were kind of considering didn't need to be part of that series of San Diego specials, the more whimsical thing. But it's also so easily solved. It's really horrific what has happened in this community. And I don't know if you remember 5 years ago, or I guess it was about 6, 7 years ago, when there was a mayor's race. And this issue had become a stalemate, and they wanted to put it on the ballot to throw out a community plan that the community had worked for years and years to put together that finally settled zoning for Barrio Logan. Barrio Logan is the only place where you could have like a welding factory right next to somebody's house. And in fact, David Alvarez, who grew up there and went on to become a city councilman, he had lung and asthma issues developed because of that exact circumstance. And so they finally came up with a plan to resolve that. But there was one tiny swath of land where they couldn't make an agreement on. And instead of just coming to a compromise, the shipbuilding industry decided to throw the whole thing out with a referendum that the mayor, Kevin Faulconer, ended up supporting. And Kevin Faulconer promised that they would come back and resolve the issue, and they never did. Now they all agree on what that land should have and how it should be designed. And yet they still have not passed a zoning law, a plan for Barrio Logan going into the future. And so it is a San Diego special, because anywhere else we should be able to resolve this and move on and give certainty to the people who live there and the people who want to build there. And we can't do it for some truly mysterious reason. It has not been resolved.
Speaking of Mayor Todd Gloria, the man who did indeed coin the term San Diego Special, he's now leading the city, and all of this stuff lands on his desk. Do you think he's in a position to make progress on any of these issues?
Well, he says he is. He has an idea and a support for one of those angles on how to solve the trolley to the airport issue, and he's excited to try to get Sandag and the transit agencies to raise the money that they need to build a truly interesting Grand Central station at that Midway Pacific and airport sort of corner of San Diego. I don't know. Maybe that does come together. He does say Barrio Logan's community plan is coming to fruition. On the convention center, he does support the tax that they say was passed in March 2020, but that has to go through the courts to make a point that it passed, even though it didn't get 2/3 of the vote as required, as they discussed earlier. It's a whole complex thing. So he thinks he's on the route to sort of disposing. That was his primary message when he won the mayor's race, is that he was going to dispose of these issues quickly so he could move on to the big ones like the homelessness, the pollution, the major crises with infrastructure that we face. He has yet to do that.
I've been speaking with Scott Lewis, Editor-in-Chief for Voice of San Diego. The San Diego Specials series is out this week. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Marina. It was a pleasure being here. It's nice to hear you.
That wraps up this week's edition of the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, M.G. Perez from KPBS News, Brandon Stone from KUSI, and Voice of San Diego's Scott Lewis. If you missed any part of our show, you can always listen anytime on the KPBS Roundtable podcast. I'm Maureen Cavanaugh. Thanks for listening, and join us next week on the Roundtable.
KPBS On Demand is supported by UC San Diego's Art Power, presenting cellist Joshua Roman, performing from his album Immunity, alongside music by J.S. Bach and more, Sunday, June 22nd at UC San Diego's Epstein Family Amphitheater. Reserve your tickets at artpower.ucsd.edu.